Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take these really complex financial frameworks and try to cut straight to what's actually valuable and actionable. So if you are in an organization that's trying to move from that messy, raw cloud usage data to something more formal, something audited, something your CFO actually trusts, then you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're doing a deep dive into one of those crucial, and let's be honest, often one of those frustrating capabilities within the FinOps framework, invoicing and chargeback. Our mission here is pretty clear. We want to help you understand exactly how mature organizations manage that complex financial handoff of cloud costs. Ensuring accuracy, transparency, and accountability for every single dollar spent. We're unpacking how that technical data finally aligns with accounting requirements.
And that alignment, that's not just some administrative task. It is really the ultimate measure of success for FinOps. Managing cloud invoices, creating those official chargebacks. It all involves setting up these specific, sometimes highly formal processes. It's about the interactions between the FinOps practice and, the finance and accounting teams. This is really where the rubber meets the road. The ultimate goal here is to make sure that every single profit and loss owner or P&L owner is bearing the financial responsibility for the resources they actually consume.
And it has to be allocated to the right budget code, right?
Precisely. It's all about transparency and making sure that allocation of expenses can stand up to, to an audit.
Okay, let's unpack the core actions here. This capability, it seems to span the whole financial life cycle, from the vendor all the way to your internal books. We're talking about managing purchase orders with cloud providers, defining formal reconciliation procedures and policy, which is way more complex than it sounds, and then handling all those little adjustments and corrections that, they always pop up with accounting systems.
Right. But then internally on the chargeback side, we need defined processes for reporting out to budget owners and then executing that formal accounting close right alongside finance.
And that second part, that internal piece, it really requires a key distinction we should probably define right up front.
Okay.
The difference between showback and chargeback. These terms get confused all the time, but they serve two very different masters, strategically speaking.
Yeah.
So showback is pretty much mandatory in any FinOps practice that's aiming for behavioral change. You can use it at any level of granularity to simply show a group the costs they're responsible for. It's mostly for awareness.
So it's informational, about visibility, getting engineers to optimize.
Exactly.
So if showback is about visibility and that behavioral change, why do we even need chargeback? What makes it worth all the extra organizational effort?
Well, that is the strategic question. Chargeback is all about the formality. It's about sending those costs to official accounting budgets.
The general ledger. To the general ledger, yes. The big difference is the compliance burden. Chargeback depends on very specific organizational accounting policies. It involves formal allocation to cost centers, which means journal entries, and sometimes even legal liability.
So it's not always required then?
It's not. What's interesting is if your organization's cloud costs are, say, easily allocated to just a single cost center, maybe a big central IT department that just soaks up the cost, then the overhead of creating official auditable chargeback might just be unnecessary. Showback does the job for accountability.
Okay, so the insight here is that showback is really essential for accountability and getting people to optimize. But chargeback is more of an optional layer of financial compliance.
Right, and it's contingent on how complex your internal P&L structure is. Neither one is inherently more mature than the other. They just serve different models.
So if you have like 50 different business units that all need to see their slice, chargeback is critical.
Exactly, for financial integrity. But if you're centralized, maybe not so much.
This is where it gets really interesting because now we get into the practical side of why this is so hard to automate. We call it the reconciliation headache. Reconciling those cloud service provider, or CSP, invoices. It is not straightforward. It's complicated by three core variables that make getting a quick financial close, well, almost impossible when you're just starting out.
It really is. The finance team, they rely on consistency and timeliness and cloud data. It just doesn't provide either of those, at least not initially. The first variable is timing. CSP invoices, they arrive monthly, but they're often 3 to 12 days after the month has ended.
But the usage data is continuous. It's coming in almost real time.
Exactly. So for an organization that needs to perform an accounting close very shortly after the period ends, let's say within 48 hours, that lag is a serious, painful problem.
So what's the tangible consequence of that lag? Because I know that finance calendar, it does not stop for anyone.
Right, it doesn't. And it means you simply cannot wait for the official final invoice data. You are often forced to use incomplete usage data and make estimates. for both your total spend and for specific line items.
So you're guessing, basically, before the real bill even arrives.
You are, and the consequence is a huge operational burden. If you estimate, you then have to implement proper, auditable processes to reconcile that estimate later with journal entries once the final invoice is in. So your finance team is manually processing these entries to true up that variance. And if your estimate was off by a material amount, say because of a surprise usage spike, you create this massive friction. You end up with very unhappy P&L owners who thought they knew their budget.
Which brings us right to the second challenge, data accuracy and alignment. Because even when the invoice does arrive, it's just summarized information, right? It's detailed only down to a sub-account level.
Right, which is fine for the provider, but it makes it incredibly difficult for you to accurately allocate those costs to your specific cost centers internally.
So things like tags or labels become critical.
Absolutely. Think about it. If an engineer misses a required tag, or if you're trying to divide up big shared costs like enterprise support, network fees, security tools, validating that summarized invoice against your granular cost allocation strategy becomes, well, almost impossible. And probably the biggest technical complication here is how commitment-based discounts are applied, things like savings plans or reserved instances.
Yeah.
The invoice might show you the total discount, but it might not break down the consumption to the specific cost center in the way you need for a fair internal allocation. This means the FinOps team has to act as this financial translation layer. They have to convert raw billing data into actionable chargeback data, and that is very time-consuming.
And the final variable in this reconciliation headache, which I imagine just adds to the administrative mess.
It's the volume of invoices. We often forget that organizations aren't just getting one monthly bill from one cloud provider. They're getting tons of invoices across multiple vendors, and crucially, separate bills for things like prepaid commitments, marketplace subscriptions, specialized usage, credit memos. I mean, we've seen organizations dealing with hundreds of these small, disparate marketplace invoices every single month. The sheer volume can be overwhelming to track manually.
So to sum up the challenge,
Yeah.
you got continuous data versus a monthly bill. You've got complex data alignment issues between a high-level invoice and your detailed cost centers, and then you have the chaos of sheer volume.
That's it.
It's really clear that success here relies so heavily on other FinOps domains. You need solid cost allocation, robust data ingestion, and great reporting and analytics to even have a chance at this.
Precisely. Your tagging strategy, which you decide on in the cost allocation domain, is the absolute foundation for your invoicing and chargeback success. If you don't tag correctly, you just can't charge back accurately. Simple as that.
That realization that all these manual processes just aren't sustainable, that leads us perfectly to the maturity scale. We should look at how a successful FinOps practice evolves, from all that manual effort to seamless integrated reporting.
The maturity scale is fantastic for this because it highlights how organizations evolve not just their tools, but their financial muscle memory. It's about moving from these highly inaccurate estimates to high-fidelity, trusted data. So in the crawl stage, everything is manual. It's very prone to variance. The chargeback is almost certainly based on estimated spend, which often results in a material difference between that estimate and the actual spend.
Which means unhappy finance teams and frustrated P&L owners. And what about shared costs and discounts in that stage?
Well, shared costs, things like enterprise support or centralized networking, they're typically just held centrally. The main business unit eats the cost because there's no strategy, or the data isn't good enough to allocate them fairly. And crucially, commitment purchases, like RIs, are simply charged to the owner of the account that bought them, not based on who actually consumed the discount across the organization.
Which is fundamentally unfair and drives all the wrong behaviors.
Totally unfair. At Crawl, reconciliation is very macro level. You're just making sure the total cost matches the total invoice. The chargeback itself uses manual journal entries, spreadsheets, and the whole thing happens days or even weeks after the invoice is actually paid. It's just a firefighting exercise every month.
Okay, so then we move to the walk stage. This is where we start building some muscle and implementing an initial strategy.
Yes. In Walk, you see a huge shift towards fairness. An initial strategy gets implemented for shared costs, even if it's a simple pro rata split. And the majority of commitment purchases are now charged back to teams based on their consumption of those discounts.
So the teams that get the benefit are the ones that pay for it.
Exactly. The true economic benefit is realized correctly. You see centralized tooling introduced here, maybe a cloud management platform, But the data still requires manual editing, some spreadsheet gymnastics, usually before it can be integrated into the finance system.
That it gets faster.
It gets faster, yeah. The process happens over the course of the financial close, so we're talking days, not weeks. And currency conversion, if you need it, is factored in manually, but teams are now actively working together to mature that chargeback file.
And then finally, the pinnacle, the run stage. This is where automation doesn't just help the process, it fundamentally changes the role of the FinOps team.
That's the key strategic difference. In Run, teams understand their cost portion based on actual consumption. All commitment purchases are correctly charged back. The huge structural shift is that chargeback and showback reporting are automatically integrated into the company's finance tooling, usually through APIs. This means invoice reconciliation and the chargeback process happen virtually at the same time, all due to automation. Finance becomes self-sufficient. They can reconcile spend without constantly calling the central FinOps team.
And the data itself is better.
Oh, much better. The chargeback data is highly detailed, showing all types of charges split out, and currency conversion is automated wherever possible, with those figures kept distinct so you can analyze currency swings versus actual usage growth.
It sounds like achieving Run is really about removing the FinOps team from that month-end fire drill. It frees them up to focus on strategic optimization. That's a huge win.
It's the whole point. When the process is automated and trusted, FinOps moves from being an operational cleanup crew to a strategic optimization partner.
This level of sophistication, it obviously requires a pretty complex collaboration. It's not just a finance problem or a FinOps problem, it's an organizational one. So what specific responsibilities fall on the different personas to make this run stage possible?
You need alignment across FinOps, finance, product, and engineering. Each role has to own a piece of that accountability puzzle. The FinOps practitioner is the data steward. They validate the provider invoices every month. They establish and maintain that allocation methodology for usage and shared charges. And critically, they provide that validated true-up data to finance, aligned with those really strict, close timelines.
And the finance role. They're the internal gatekeepers of the budget, yeah.
They are. They're using the centralized tooling to execute the chargeback postings in the financial system. But their role is more strategic than just posting numbers. They track changes in cloud costs related to currency fluctuations versus usage changes.
That's a critical distinction.
It is. It lets them understand true operational growth versus just external financial pressures. And they partner with FinOps to set up the processes for charging back shared costs.
Okay, and on the technical side, the engineering role. They're the ones actually generating the spend.
Their compliance is non-negotiable. They must comply with company tagging and account policies that drive that detailed chargeback. If the tags are wrong, the chargeback is wrong. They have to review their allocated costs each month for awareness and budgeting. It's not enough to just review their tech. They have to understand the economic impact.
And finally, the product role, who I imagine is the most strategic user of this information.
Arguably, yes. They review the cloud costs they're accountable for, they use that data to understand profitability, and they leverage that chargeback info for the prioritization of optimization work. If a report shows a feature is really expensive, they know exactly where to point their engineers. They're also the ones messaging cost expectations up to leadership.
So how do we know if we're doing this right? We need metrics to prove we're moving toward that run maturity. What specific key performance indicators, or KPIs, should we be tracking?
We need KPIs that measure both accuracy and speed. 3 are really essential. First, the general ledger recharge rate. This is the variance between the cloud spend your FinOps tool reports and the actual amount charged in the general ledger.
Can you break that down? That sounds like a technical term for a measure of organizational trust.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's the ultimate trust metric. If your FinOps reporting says you spent $1 million, but the finance general ledger only reflects $900,000 in charged expenses, your recharge rate is 90% and your variance is 10%.
And that gap.
That gap causes finance to distrust the entire FinOps practice. You have to get that variance to 0 for true run maturity.
Okay, what's number 2?
Second is chargeback processing time. Just measuring the efficiency from when a cost is incurred to when it's allocated. Moving this from days to minutes is a clear sign of automation. And third is the percent accuracy of chargebacks, making sure charges are allocated to the correct cost center. That shows the quality of your tagging and allocation logic.
And beyond the hard numbers, what are some of the broader measures that tell you you're succeeding?
A huge one is just the systemic reduction in cycle time. Moving from those painful weeks in crawl to near simultaneous automation in run. The other key measure is cultural. It's the presence of an established, collaborative, and most importantly, a trusting relationship between finance, accounting, and FinOps. When they stop seeing each other as adversaries and start working together, that's a measure of success that goes way beyond the numbers.
To bring this all full circle, let's summarize the crucial inputs and outputs that feed this whole system.
Okay, on the input side, you need the technical foundation, tagging standards, and your cost allocation methodology from FinOps. But you also need the non-negotiable financial mandates.
Like
The financial policies like your depreciation strategy and the general ledger requirements. So the chart of accounts, the approved cost centers, all provided by finance and accounting. If those financial inputs aren't defined, FinOps is just shooting in the dark.
And the one crucial physical thing that comes out of all this work.
The key output is the final chargeback file. This is a highly structured document. It's got metadata, financial data, and it's all perfectly aligned to the organization's general ledger structure. It's prepared for seamless, automated ingestion by your financial systems. That file is the mechanism.
We've seen that robust invoicing and chargeback isn't just about paying bills on time. It really is the core financial engine that makes cloud cost accountability functional across an entire enterprise.
Absolutely.
Without this, FinOps just stays in the realm of technical optimization,
Yeah.
and it never crosses over into true financial governance.
That's right. This capability emphasizes data quality and timing integrity above all else. And what's really fascinating here is that even when data is incomplete, when we're waiting for that final invoice, we see this need to make estimates and perform these true-up entries, which raises an important question for you, the listener, to think about. When does the variance between your estimated spend and your actual spend become so small that it's no longer considered a material variance by your auditors? At what point can your organization simply trust the initial estimate and avoid those cumbersome manual true-up journal entries altogether? Because reaching that level of ingrained auditable trust, well, that requires achieving true run maturity.
A great point on trust being the ultimate goal. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into invoicing and chargeback in the FinOps framework. We'll see you next time.